Dr. Sepehr Mortaheb, University of Hamburg.
Okay, hello everyone, and thanks for attending the symposium. I will talk mainly about the application of global signal now and how it can help us to characterize mental states, specifically during rest, actually. So during resting state, our mind is dynamic. So it can wander freely from time to time, place to place, topic to topic. And so we have a dynamically changing mental state during rest. Also, at the same time, our brain also is dynamic. So the functional configuration of our brain dynamically changes over time. The question that we were trying to answer in our lab was that what is the relationship between these two dynamically changing domains? So the investigation of dynamic functional connectome has a long history, actually, some years. For example, Demertzi et al. Tried to investigate these patterns in different levels of consciousness, or El Baba et al. Tried to investigate these patterns in different sleep stages, or even in psychedelic state. The thing common among all these studies is this hyperconnectivity pattern that also Dimitri showed and talked about it, which shows a common shared activity across the brain regions. And we can calculate it just by averaging the activity across the regions, and we call it global signal here. So my question here is that if we don't regress this pattern out, this global signal out, which kind of information it can give us? During rest, mental states are really diverse, actually. So we just focused on two extreme conditions. When during normal wakefulness, we have periods of mind blanking, or on the other side, if we perturb the dynamic system of our brain and mind with external agents such as psychedelic drugs, how global signal can help us to interpret these mental states. What is mind blanking first? Suppose that you are at rest and your mind is free to wander, and suddenly someone comes and interrupts you and asks you, what were you thinking about? And then you have the feeling that I don't remember, or for example, I feel that my mind was empty or it was blank, something like that. We call it a mind blanking episode. And we wanted to see what happens in our brain when we have such an experience during our wakefulness. One way to investigate mind blanking is a paradigm called experience sampling. So we put participants inside the fMRI scanner. They are at rest. At random time points, we just interrupt them and ask them, what were you thinking about? And they report their mental states. For example, in our experiment, they were reporting whether they had a thought about the experiment, or they had a thought unrelated to the experiment, or they had some sensory perception, or they had mind blanking episodes. And afterwards, because we have also the fMRI data during this experiment, we can calculate the dynamically changing functional connectivity patterns and then calculate the dynamic states. And our question was that which one of these dynamic states is more similar to the connectivity patterns related to the mind blanking. What we found was that this hyperconnectivity pattern actually has the highest similarity to the connectivity patterns before reporting the mind blanking episodes compared to the rest of the mental states. Okay, now we have a hyperconnected state here. How global signal, which is also related to global signal, how global signal can help us to understand mind blanking better. So first of all, if we regress global signal out, we don't see this pattern anymore. And this is the only pattern which is affected by regressing a global signal out. But another observation is that if we redo all the analysis again, just considering that global signal is not there anymore, we cannot see any specific or significant differences between connectivity patterns and mental states. Okay, it doesn't being shown properly, but what we see here is that if we consider the amplitude of global signal, the amplitude of global signal actually is significantly higher during mind-blanking reports compared to the rest of the mental states. Okay, what does it mean? So we had two observations. Before mind-blanking reports, we have a hyperconnectivity pattern, and we have very high, significantly high global signal amplitude. Previous studies related this hyperconnectivity pattern to actually a slow wave activity that exists in our brain even during our wakefulness. And also we discussed today in this symposium that this high amplitude of global signal can be related to the reduced levels of vigilance or arousal. All these two together can tell us that there are some episodes of neural silencing, actually, that in those times our neurons at the same time, they don't fire with each other at the same time. And these can result in some episodes of local sleeps that also recently has been shown that local sleeps is directly related to the mind blanking. So we can see here how how not regressing out the global signal can give us some information about this specific mental state that happens during normal wakefulness. But what about our psychedelic experiment? When we use psychedelics, actually we have a unique experience that we cannot have during our normal wakefulness. We can have some experiences, for example, experience of unity or a spiritual experience and different things. And it is really useful to study the relationship between brain and mind with such drugs because they perturb the system, and we can study the perturbed system to understand it better. And this was a study that we performed in collaboration with University of Maastricht. The data were acquired there. There were two groups of participants. One of them received psilocybin, a magic mushroom, as a psychedelic drug, and the second group received just placebo. At the time of the peak effect of the drug, resting state fMRI were acquired, and 6 hours later, also participants were filling some questionnaires just to report which kind of experiences they had during the psychedelic state. We did the same kind of analysis. We estimated the connectivity patterns across the time, and we clustered them into 4 connectivity patterns. And we, again, observed the hyperconnectivity pattern there. And what we observed further was that this hyperconnectivity pattern has the significantly higher occurrence rate during psychedelic state compared to the normal or placebo condition. Also, there was a higher tendency to revisit this connectivity state in our brain during psychedelic state. So it means that our brain in general tends to be hyper-connected in psychedelic state. But how it is related to our mental state? There are different dimensions that we can study during psychedelic state, such as experience of unity, a spiritual experience, or changed meaning of percept. I don't want to go into the details of these mental states, because these are the things that significantly change after usage of psilocybin. And at the same time, also, we had the highest tendency of our brain to be configured as a hyperconnectivity profile. And we wanted to see what is the relationship between these two domains, so we used canonical correlation analysis. And what we found was that this tendency to be configured into pattern number 3, which is the hyperconnected pattern, is mainly related to a mental state called oceanic boundlessness, which is somehow related to the feeling you have during psychedelic state that you don't feel any boundary between yourself and the rest of the world. So you are somehow united with the surrounding environment. What we found here is that, okay, again, this hyperconnectivity pattern is giving us a unique experience. But this is exactly the same pattern that we also observed during mind blanking reports. So how can we explain that? So we again asked for the help of global signal. What we observed here is that during psychedelic state is a significant reduction in the amplitude of bold signal, and as a result in the amplitude of global signal in general. And when we regress the global signal out, we cannot find any meaningful or significant difference between these two conditions. So, what we have as a take-home message, if I want to say, so we had two different phenomena. We studied psychedelic state and mind blanking with dynamic functional connectivity analysis. And in both of them, we found that this hyperconnectivity pattern shows highest occurrence rate, or our brain tends to be in this state. But these are two completely different mental states. If this hyperconnectivity state is accompanied by higher amplitude of global signal, it can be related to an experience such as mind blanking. If it is accompanied by lower amplitudes of global signal, it can be related to experience of psychedelic state. So that's how global signal can somehow help us to understand different mental states better. And as a result, because global signal is a proxy of our physiological state, again, I repeat the conclusion of other speakers. First of all, it is really important that we consider both brain and body or physiological states together to interpret what's happening there. But I personally think that in situations that you do not have direct measurements of your bodily signals or your physiological signals, and in mental states that are really related to these kinds of physiological states, I think keeping global signal will give us useful information. At the end, I would like to thank my previous group, actually, Physiology of Cognition, that I performed all this research there, and all of our collaborators from Liège, Lausanne, Maastricht, Jülich, and UC Leuven. Thank you very much.
So I don't see any related question from the audience, but I can ask one.
Yeah.
Like you said, what would be your preference when it comes to regressing out the global signal? And when you perform like a study, would you go report both? One?
Personally, I would do both. So first, I do the analysis once with global signal, once without global signal, and to see if we have comparable results or meaningful differences between these two methods or not. Till now, all the studies I had done, I concluded that I need to keep it. But maybe in the future, I change my mind.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. we can have like one question across all speakers, and then we can conclude the session because we're almost time. So you can come. It's one particular question that was upvoted, and then we can have yours. Thank you. So the question that was upvoted is like, global signal regression consists of gray matter, white matter, CSF signals, with white matter and CSF being noise. So wouldn't it be useful to focus on gray matter regression than GSR?
It turns out it doesn't really matter too much. Oftentimes we do gray matter as global signal regression, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't. They all have the same effect, at least in our hands.
Yes? Yes, please.
So really interesting talks. In the whole global signal regression debate, there's something I've been thinking about for a while, and your talks kind of sharpened this for me, which is the argument is often, do we use global signal regression as a denoising pre-processing step? But most of the ways you've all been talking, you're really talking about it as a data transformation step in post-processing analysis. So how do we distort our data, like z-scoring, or regularization, or all these other tools that we think of as a post-processing tool? And I wonder, does this kind of sit with you well, that the way you're using it and the way you're thinking about it isn't actually any more about denoising and more about transforming our data to highlight what you do or don't want to see, and then that sort of alters how we're discussing whether it's the right transform step?
Actually, I like this question because it was sort of what I was getting at in the beginning of thinking about, like, what you do with it depends on what you already think about it, right? If you think that it's just noise, then it's part of your denoising pipeline, and that's what it is, right? If you think, wait a minute, this might be of interest because there's some neuronal signal and there's, related to arousal or this and that, then you think of it the second way you described, right? So I think it's a little bit of a question of, like, we have all these preformed ideas about what it is, and we bring that to our analyses, and that's, it's funny to me to see it kind of shift in this direction, because the last time this OHBM had this symposium, I think it maybe went in the other direction, and everyone said, what are we talking about? Of course it's noise, why are we even here? So, I mean, the fact that we're all still here is, to me, suggests that we don't know exactly what we're dealing with.
There are plenty of questions, and this seems that you're a very vibrant audience. Thank you so much. I will give these questions personally to the speakers. Let's conclude here and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much for coming.
Nice job. Doing nice. Hi. That last time.
We have
Is it enough?
Yeah, maybe we can. Maybe we can sit. We can sit there. Yeah.
I basically want to chat about